Jeffrey Epstein, the man of the hour, the guy connected to those in power, and the man whose island was shamelessly stolen and cheaply rebranded into the Fortnite Island, has been brought back into the spotlight in this week's recent news cycle. Everyone's been talking about this infamous figure, and if you don't know who this guy is, you're an extremely lucky person because his rabbit hole goes so deep, I would expect you to have already known who this guy is by now. So, today, I'm going to be breaking down the most recent headlines and also covering what has led up to what we know up until now regarding his case. First and foremost, before we dive deeper into the Epstein lore, we have to first understand who he was. Epstein was a financier born and raised in Brooklyn who started off his career teaching math at a college prep school. And already off the bat, this guy Epstein was flirting with students who were most likely underage or barely of age. He eventually was fired. Luckily, was offered a new position at a hotshot investment bank known as Bear Stearns. At his new job, he rose the ranks pretty quickly, and that's a talking point I'll get to later. However, he ended up going from a low-level junior assistant to a floor trader and eventually an options trader, a much higher rank where Epstein was tasked with advising higher status, much wealthier clients. He proved his worth by assisting the uber-rich clientele at Bear Stearns and rose the ranks, grinded to the top, and became a limited partner with the bank. Unfortunately for him, he was found guilty for violating U.S. commerce laws and using shady loopholes, you know, the shady billionaire stuff we know now that he was notorious for. With that, Epstein resigned and was asked to leave the firm, but was still cool with his Bear Stern buddies. So, Jeffrey starts his own consulting firm on his own, Intercontinental, a group focused on recovering stolen assets, which sounds very noble, but in his own words, he was simply a high level bounty hunter. He essentially was consulting governments and the 1% who either had their funds embezzled or had embezzled funds themselves. Now, if you don't know what embezzlement is, it's basically just what you do in a GTA heist, stealing lots of money, only this time Epstein did it with suits, ties, and lawyers. Now, during his time with Intercontinental, he acquired a valuable client, a Saudi businessman who was the middleman for transferring American weapons from Israel to Iran as part of the Iran Contra affair. And here's where the controversial, weird stuff starts, okay? Epstein was very confident and keen on flaunting his accessories and items to his friends, and it was made known that around this time in the 80s, Epstein was in possession of an Austrian passport, with his place of residence listing Saudi Arabia. Okay, weird. Why does an American financier have a fake passport with a fake place of residence in a foreign country? Well, usually people affiliated with the intelligence community, so your CIA, MI6, or Mossad agents typically travel around the world, and with that knowledge, it was widely theorized that Epstein was an intelligence agent planted by some sort of foreign government or shadow agency because of his behaviors and the way some things about him just don't add up. Why did Epstein have so many surveillance cameras on all of his properties, like Little St. James and the surrounding islands, with backup tape footage as evidence for blackmail? That's why. And it just feels out of place. So the conspiracies just pile up, and there's only more to go down. We ask the question, is Epstein a contingency plan in order to trap the most wealthiest and influential people hostage with this intelligence by having them on his island? Why did they mysteriously have the cameras in his prison cell and around his death just turn off, not catching his suicide? And the even more suspicious part, his 21-page pour over will was signed just 2 days before his death, and all of his holdings were transferred into a trust fund. Now, if this doesn't scream intelligence agency, I don't know what does. So, one possibility can be that Epstein truly was a sex offender, sex trafficker, and overall just pedophile because Well, obviously he did everything. The evidence is there. Now, the question is who's involved in this? Because Epstein could have more than likely have done all these things, but have been so vital and crucial to intelligence agencies and to other powers, higher up powers that we might not even know of. And I believe that Jeffrey Epstein was one of the first to really expose the general public to the bigger picture behind our American government and national governments in as a whole, right? In the 21st century, at least, with government corruption, it has opened up a new leaf for us as people, as the general public, to be more wary, to be more skeptical and cynical of who is really in charge and who's calling the shots, not to blindly fall for any propaganda by the government. Because in recent light, Donald Trump has actually been in the headlines for not revealing and unredacting the Epstein files or releasing the Epstein files. And it's stirred up a lot of controversy because during the 2024 election, he promised to release the Epstein files, and it was one of his big campaign promises.
The list of clients that went to the island has not been made public.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? Probably will be, by the way. Probably.
So if you're able to, you'll be.
Yeah, I'd certainly take a look at it. Now, Kennedy's interesting because it's so many years ago. They do that for danger too, because, endangers certain people, et cetera, et cetera. So Kennedy is very different from the Epstein thing. But yeah, I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I'd have no problem with it.
And as of late, as 2025, he has said that they're not anything to worry about, that the Epstein files were a bunch of just it's a waste of time, is what he said. It was brewed up by Hillary, crooked Hillary, Obama, and Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. Now, the Democrats didn't release the files either. So it all points to one big talking point. It seems like something within the US government actually doesn't want us to see. It's something that they don't want us to know. Who knows what's in those files and or who it convicts or who's in trouble is the bigger question, and it's something we need to ask, and we can dive deeper into this as certain government officials, when Epstein was being tried and convicted, actually showed, and it was reported that Alexander Acosta, the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida, who is the one who actually was handling Epstein's criminal case, in 2008, he had told interviews of Donald Trump's first transition team that Alexander Acosta, quote, was told that Epstein belonged to an intelligence agency, I guess, and to leave it alone, that Epstein was above his pay grade. This begs the question that somebody in the internal affairs of the United States actually advised against looking deeper into Epstein. And that basically, with him saying that he was, quote, above his pay grade, seems that, well, somebody is clearly pulling the strings at a much higher level within the US government. So, the big question to really ask here and to note is my government really acting with my best interest? And sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Most of the time, they're not. However, we just must take away that we can't let it consume or envelop our lives. And that was a big talking point that Trump kind of said, and that others also noted, that some people on Twitter were going a little bit too crazy over the Epstein files being released. Now, does it mean they shouldn't be released? No. I believe that they 100% should be, and the general public deserves to know. However, the more important issue that we must root out is the corruption within our government. So, should the Epstein files be released? Yes. With that being said, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day scrolling. And yeah, see you later.